Just before lunch, we did a memorial service for Shikaku, who, as I mentioned, died in December, and it was unexpected. I notice whenever something like this happens, there's a kind of math that my mind jumps to very quickly, where I want to determine, and I know I'm not alone, was it too soon? Even if I don't consciously have the thought, I know that I'm measuring this. Shikaku is in his 60s. He wasn't young, but he wasn't old. But of course, we look on the news and we see people who are very, very young. They're dying. And maybe we jump immediately to, it's too soon. Because that feels true. And when someone is close to us, even if they're very old, even if they made it a long, long time, the loss can be felt in such a way that it would always be too soon. But when I challenge this in my own mind and I think too soon, what does it mean too soon? What do I think this is supposed to be? What's the right size for a life? I see this other part of me that comes up that tries to find an antidote to the question. And the antidote to the question is something like, these things happen at the right time. And I can try to rest in that. And I have tried to rest in that, in this idea that whatever happens is the right thing, because now it's happened. And that doesn't feel quite right either. And I find myself then seeking a middle way, but the middle way I know can't be the middle way between two extremes. It has to be a middle way that's outside of them, outside of this story we have about how things are supposed to be. And everything I say about this today might be kind of messy because it's messy in my mind. Because it's like, even as I'm saying it, I feel myself chasing the question. I look at my own life. I'm 51. Midlife, that's what we say, right? I'm probably a little while into my midlife crisis, but this is a good spot to talk about the middle, we think. And I do know, I'm not naive. I know that I'm not at the beginning. But I also don't know that I'm not at the end. Because no one knows if they're at the end. So I act as if I'm in the middle, or I act as if I've been maybe not promised, but given some reassurances that I might make it to 80. Because there are statistics that tell me that's something I can kind of feel good about believing. So I can make plans for that, and I can think about that, and I can think, what do I want to do with the next 30 years? And maybe if I spend enough time with that, and if I actually get that thing, if I make it Maybe I get there and I think, oh, this is enough. I did it. This is good. But if I do, it's just that 1 in a million time when I told myself a story and it didn't turn out to be destructive. Because all the stories are destructive. All the stories invite me to live some sort of lie. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, there will be people who say, oh, it was too soon. And I'll be crying out from some other part of the universe saying, think about that more. And someone else will be saying, that's what was supposed to happen. And I don't know for sure, but I think I'll also be saying, no, there's something else here. And this doesn't just apply to living and dying, it applies to everything, but that's where I am right now, is this question about what our life is supposed to be. And how we see this all around us all the time. And everything seems to either confirm, in the sense that, you know, we see someone on TV. The other day, the oldest man in the world passed away. And he was, I think, 115. And nobody said it was too soon. Everybody just said, what an amazing thing. What a life. So we settled on this was the right time. And immediately, the news, they said, now there's a worldwide search on to figure out who is the new oldest man. We need to know this because this person sets the bar. That person is the one we're comfortable with. When the oldest person on the planet dies, we get to feel okay about dying. But maybe that's the only one. Everyone else falls into this other set of questions about what it is supposed to be. The story that someone died too soon exists because I want to make sense of the universe. And my way of making sense of the universe is to say that there are rules and that there is fair and there is unfair. And when things are unfair and I can recognize them as unfair, the universe makes sense. And when things are fair and I recognize them as fair, the universe makes sense. But it's from me. Which brings me back to the idea of the middle way. When I first heard the notion of the middle way, I remember it again as a math problem. Because in the Buddha's case, the story is about the middle way between luxury and renunciation, luxury and asceticism. And I would ask myself, and I asked myself for years, what's the thing in between, right? Because I had never really experienced asceticism, and I had never really experienced luxury in the way that we're meant to understand it with him, where we imagine that he's on the far end of the spectrum and people are feeding him, you know, figs. I saw it as the kind of problem where you need a whiteboard so that you can map out somehow, incrementally, what it looks like to have slightly less luxury or slightly more of the basics, until we find something that is the middle. And then when we know what the middle is, we hold to that. And I see now, and I think many people go through this process, how useless an endeavor that is. Because again, it just rests in our story about what this is and what this is. And if we think that we found that magic spot, and if we hold to that magic spot, then what? We get to feel good about ourselves? Do we suddenly activate some sort of button that makes us more spiritually aware or have greater spiritual potential because we found the sweet spot? More and more, I think the middle way, at least in the context of this tradition, is not the middle way between extremes. It's the one where we let those questions fall away, genuinely fall away, and allow ourselves the discomfort of what remains. In the case of someone dying, whether it's someone who is close to us or someone we're seeing on TV, that reality, the fact of someone having been alive one moment and being dead the next, I think feels, for most of us, most of the time, too profound to actually let in its entirety. And so we don't. We make a story about it. Right? Again, often a story that's about justice or a story that's about sadness. We think about how we want to be remembered and we tell our relatives, you know, I don't want the sad funeral, I want the happy funeral. I want the celebration, right? Or I want it done in this kind of church. I want the story to make sense to me. And I want, even in my death, to tell a story to other people so that everyone knows how to feel about this, which is beautiful and it's kind. And it's a little bit in opposition to what's really going on. Which is that when we encounter something like death, there is more that we don't know than we do know. And spending time with that is hard. So we simplify it. And again, it's true for everything. And it's what we are talking about all the time in this tradition. How do we find our way to not measuring things, to not measuring our experience and not measuring the reality in front of us? When we see someone die, when we see a child has died, if we can hold back from the story, if we can hold back from it's too soon, if we can hold back from it's unfair, I know, because I feel this too, it feels like in doing that, I'm allowing for this other story of I should somehow embrace this. I should see this as the right thing. I should let go of my anger. I shouldn't think it's unfair. Right? But all that is jumping from story to story. We can hold loss. We can move through loss without knowing what we're doing. We can move through loss without being sure. And again, even as I say, without being sure, I know it sounds like there's a question, right? That somewhere, someone could say, no, 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 actually, this was unfair. Or actually, this was too soon. And what I'm trying to wrestle with here is not that there's a question we're ignoring. But that in making it a question, we ignore something more important. I don't know that there is a right way to do many things. I don't know that there is a right time for many events in our lives. I know there are times when it feels as if all the puzzle pieces click. And I know there are times when it feels something more disjointed, something more chaotic. But that's a feeling. And in both of those cases, when I have that feeling, there's a magnet pull toward it, toward the story of that. I don't believe that this tradition or these teachings or this practice offers a secret roundabout path to the right place, where we see everything in just the right way and then we really get it. As I've said before, it's more like this tradition, this practice, these teachings are more like an invitation to put on a blindfold and start feeling the world in a different way. To agree to not know based on first impressions. To agree to get our hands a little bit dirty. To agree to fumble around. To agree to trip along the way. To agree to be truly lost in that way where you're paying attention to everything. You're smelling everything. You're hearing everything. Not necessarily in order to get someplace, but to really, really be here. That's what's on my mind today. And that's where I'll stop.